Dracula, Batman, Grandpa 3 times a night, and the Fujifilm 16mm 1.4. What do they all have in common? They're all creatures of the night. Hey guys, Omar here, and yes, Fujifilm does make a 16mm 2.8 that's smaller, cheaper, weather resistant, easier to carry around. But I was super thankful to have the 16mm 1.4 when my best friend Moe dragged me to go night shooting in New York. I was like, no, I'm not going out. I'm so glad I did go out because we had the best time pretending to be creatures of the night and doing some great night photography. I don't ever do any night shooting, and it was the first time that I was super thankful for the 16mm 1.4's 1.4. And the reason is it's a big jump from 2.8 to 1.4. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually 2 stops away, 2.8 to f2 to 1.4. And each stop gives you twice as much light. So we're talking 4 times more light using the 16mm 1.4. Now you could obviously get the same exposure if you're using a 2.8 lens versus a 1.4 lens, but the 2.8 lens has to work a little harder. You have to make some compromises. And the 2 big compromises are your shutter speeds have to be slow enough. And I don't know about you, but I drink coffee, so I really can't shoot it 1/10 of a second or 1/5 of a second handheld. Maybe you can. But using the 16mm 1.4, I could actually keep my shutter speeds up a little higher to hand-hold shots. This is good if you're doing street photography at night. You're actually trying to capture people. Now, I was okay with a little bit of blur. I think in night photography, it's kind of cool to get a little bit of blur if someone's walking by. That's totally fine. We'll call it art. But with the 2.8, the shutter speeds are way too slow. So that's your compromise number 1, is your shutter speeds to get the same exposure sometimes have to be slower, and you're gonna get some motion blur. And the second, if you're shooting the 2.8 and you do need those shutter speeds to go up higher, well, you gotta crank up that ISO like twice as much. Twice as much? I don't know the math. You gotta go up twice as much. So instead of shooting at ISO 800, as I am on the 16mm 1.4, I gotta do 1600, 32. You'd have to do 32 ISO on the using the 2.8. Now that's just a very clean example, but if I'm shooting 3200 ISO using the 1.4, well, that tells you you got to go up 2 full stops for the same exposure when you're shooting 2.8. So that's 6400, 12,800. So now you have to shoot high grain images, which I'm not a super fan of. You might like crazy nighttime grain, but I don't want to shoot the images at 12,800 ISO. So that was where it was most useful, is where my limit was 3200 on super low light images. Let's take a look at some of them. best time, super best time. And you should know there is some post-processing that's involved as well if you're doing night photography. Edit your images, man. So the camera can only do so much. You can gather the light, but dodging and burning your images, bringing out the shadows. The lights are so bright compared to the shadows when you're doing night photography. You got to tone those down. So I can show you guys if you want. I can show you how to edit an image at night. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments below. Like this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!